Hey folks, Nathan P. Butler here. This is another of our content overview videos, and this time we're looking at Space Hulk Death Angel, the card game, in all of its glory, including its 4 expansion packs. The Space Marine Pack 1, Mission Pack 1, Deathwing Space Marine Pack, and Tyranid Enemy Pack. Now, this is a game that was originally released back in 2010. Fantasy Flight Games got into a partnership or a working relationship with Games Workshop back in 2008, and they started producing different licensed games that were set in the various Warhammer settings, in this case Warhammer 40k or Warhammer 40,000. Unfortunately, that partnership ended in 2017. It was announced near the end of 2016 that it would be wrapping up. As of February 2017, all of the games from that collaboration were effectively pulled from Fantasy Flight Games' library. This game came out in 2010 and had a second printing in 2012, along with some expansion packs. Except here's the thing. The expansion packs themselves were not produced to regular retail. They were experimenting with basically a form of print on demand through Fantasy Flight itself. If you wanted them, you could get them straight through Fantasy Flight, and yes, there was an option for retailers to get their hands on these print-on-demand products if they wanted to, but not in sort of the normal way. So as a result, what you have here is a base game that was widely available, but eventually fell out of print about 7 years ago, as I'm recording this in late 2024, and then a bunch of expansion packs that didn't see very wide distribution in terms of where you could get them, and weren't produced in very large numbers because they were print on demand. As a result, over the years, as Space Hulk Death Angel has become sort of a beloved and frustrating game because of how difficult it is in the solo gaming community, even though it is up to a 6-player game, as it has become so beloved in the solo community and more have sought to get their hands on this out-of-print game, the price of these expansion packs has absolutely skyrocketed. The game itself can run you up to about a max of about $100 if it's sealed. It's not extremely expensive, though certainly more expensive than it was at launch. The individual expansion packs, these first 2, the Space Marine and Mission Pack, the most you'll usually see those run is maybe about $100 each. That's probably stretching it a bit. You can usually find them for a little bit less. But the Deathwing and Tyranid packs, those can run you $200 to $300 each these days on the secondary market. So what I want to do here is show you Space Hulk Death Angel, do a content overview of all of these packs, but in the process, hopefully not only give you a sense of whether maybe this is something you might be interested in terms of the mechanisms of the base game, but also give you a sense of what these different packs actually add to the game, so that those who are completists like me might have a sense of what they're getting themselves into, and so that those who aren't completists might get a better sense of which ones they want to hunt down, which would help them with budgeting for these future purchases, or to be able to say, you know what, this doesn't add enough to justify X amount of dollars, I'm out. Either way, I hope it will be helpful. As I'm showing you the cards, by the way, they are going to be sleeved. I was fortunate enough that I spent years saying, no, I'm never going to get this game unless I can get it at a good price with everything together. And it turns out I managed to find an eBay auction for $350 a few years ago, which, granted, is a lot, but I've really been wanting the game. And that's basically the price of the Tyranid pack sometimes, by itself. And the entire thing was sleeved. So I have kept the sleeves. I will show you where I'm storing everything because it really doesn't fit well sleeved in the box. But I want to give you a chance to see all the stuff for this, so at least you kind of know what's out there. If this is something that's been on your radar, but you've kind of been wary of it because of the price. For me, it's been worth it because I play it quite a bit, and because I know that I actually got a pretty decent deal given the combined price at the time on the secondary market, even though, boy, that was a hit. Thank goodness for teaching summer school and extra student pay way back when. So let's do it. Let's dive in, starting with the base game. So this is the base game here of Space Hulk Death Angel, the card game. It says the title here. Usually in the rulebook it just calls itself Death Angel. Warhammer 40,000, man versus alien, in the grim dark future for 1 to 6 players. Yes, 1 to 6, which is a pretty big player count for something in a small box here. Fantasy Flight logo and Fantasy Flight games there. On the side here, we have Silverline, although oddly it'll look weird on a shelf because it's meant to be set up like this, but Silverline, Space Hulk Death Angel, the card game, a game by Corey Koniska. I always say his name wrong, but I've got quite a few games by this creator. Then one of the characters here. Similar design on the other side, but at least this time, if you're sitting it upright, silver line is down at the bottom, even though it looks kind of weird at the bottom instead of the top, but at least is right side up. Then we've got one in, Space Hulk Deathwing card game, a game by, etc., all the same stuff. Same on the other side. And the back, as always, is going to tell us a little bit about what to expect from the game. So we have the logo up here again. Before we get to the description, it is ages 13 plus, 1 to 6 players, 30 to 60 minutes. Then you got your various icons and whatnot. Games Workshop is represented here, though not on the front. Here's what types of sleeves you can use, UPC, legalese, and all that. Again, there are 2 printings of this, 2010 and 2012. The only difference I am aware of for 2012 is one specific set of icons that were added to the cards to make it a little bit easier for colorblind players and to match those expansions. We'll be seeing a little bit more about that when we get there. So it says, Purge the Xenos Threat. Incoming transmission, level red. Blood Angels mission briefing, 7362-1. Brother Sergeant Lorenzo. Assemble your Terminator squad and assault Space Hulk Sin of Damnation by a boarding torpedo. Extreme Genestealer infestation aboard. Your objective is to destroy the forward launch control room. Expect heavy resistance. Estimates, 44% chance of mission success with 86% squad casualties. End transmission. That is really hard to read with that print on a linen box surface, even if we didn't have the glare here. Space Hulk Death Angel, the card game, is a cooperative game in which 1 to 6 players control a squad of Terminator Space Marines venturing deep into a massive Space Hulk. Through teamwork, bravery, and raw firepower, players must survive against overwhelming odds to eliminate the Genestealer threat. Failure is not an option. Though it will happen a lot. Nothing inside either side of the box. If you want to just run around the edge here, you had Red November advertised on one side, Chaos Marauders on another, Talisman, and then Warrior Knights. So definitely an era with a lot of Fantasy Flight games that aren't sort of tip of the tongue these days. And with that glare, let me hold this up for you here so you can see it a little bit better. Front and back. Since the glare is worse on this particular product than most of the ones I've shown under the same lighting. We then have our rulebook, the rules of play. It's okay. I will say it's nice to have the quick reference on the back and whatnot, but it can be a little bit confusing if you read it without actually watching a playthrough. It's just kind of disjointed in the way that it's all laid out. It makes sense once you put it all together, but the way they break it down bit by bit has you a lot of times in the first part of the rulebook being like, what are they talking about? And they won't explain a key concept until later in the rulebook. Not one of the better rulebooks out there, but there's plenty of gameplay you can find online that do a great job of showing it. So let's look at the non-card components first. These are support tokens. They can be used for various things within the game. More commonly, when you use a support action using a particular card for your particular 2 Space Marines, that allows you to put one of those tokens on any Space Marine, whether it's yours or not, and essentially they're reroll tokens. If you are attacking or defending against a Genestealer swarm that you are facing, not if they're coming up behind you, flanking you, but one that you are facing, each one of these that you discard allows you to reroll a combat die 1 time. Proof of purchase, don't know why I kept it after all these years, but it's still there. And these here are your combat team markers. I do have them in little coin capsules to keep them safe. The way these will work is that at the beginning of the game, at least if you're playing with just the base game, these are replaced by cards in a later expansion. Each player is going to have control of some Space Marines. And the Space Marines come in 2 Marines for each of these types. So whoever, for instance, has this one, has the 2 Marines that go with that color. In the second printing, that symbol there, the sword, for example, would actually be on the card itself to help you differentiate, but that is not the case for the first printing. In a 4, 5, or 6 player game, every player just gets 1. So every player has 2 Marines they're controlling. If you're playing a 2 or 3 player game, everybody grabs 2 of these. So each player has 4 Marines, but they're still considered 2 separate groups of 2 for gameplay purposes. And if you're playing solo, which tends to be the way that this game really shines these days, and that a lot of people talk about these days, you're going to be playing with 3. So you have a total of 6 Marines, but again, they're all treated as separate groups of 2 when playing. So out of the box, you have 6 different possible teams of 2 that you could play with. And then we have this mother something. This is the combat die, and this will be the bane of your existence when playing this game. If you do not like a game where die rolls can be dire, this is not the game for you. And it's a unique, weird little die. Notice it has a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5. There is no 6, but there is a 0 on here. And notice that the 1, 2, and 3 have skull symbols. So, you'll typically be rolling for 2 things, when you attack and when you are being attacked. If you are attacking, then you will roll that die, and barring different rules maybe on a card or something, if you roll with a skull symbol, which is a 50% chance, right, because it's on 3 of the 6 sides, then you get to kill 1 Genestealer in the swarm that you are attacking. A swarm is a group of cards for the Genestealers, as we will see. On the other hand, if you are being attacked by a swarm of Genestealers, you need to roll this die and roll higher, not equal to or higher, but higher than the number of Genestealers in the swarm that is attacking you. So say there are 3 in the swarm that are attacking you, you need to roll a 4 or a 5. So yes, that also means since there's a 0, it doesn't go 1 to 6, it goes 0 to 5. Even if you're being attacked only by 1 Genestealer, you still have a 1/3 chance of not rolling higher. And if you don't roll higher, you die. Period. There is no health marker for each character in this game or anything like that. Literally, if you don't roll well, you're dead. And if all the Space Marines are killed, the players lose. It is a cooperative game. Now, thankfully, there are ways to play around with this with different abilities, and you have these reroll tokens. But again, the reroll tokens, the support tokens as they're called, because they are used for some other things, they're not just rerolls. These can only come into play, again, barring a special ability, if you are facing the Genestealers coming after you. Each Marine is going to face either left or right, and the Genestealers will either be to your left or right. And if you're not facing the right direction, you can't reroll anything, you're at the mercy of luck. Even when you reroll, you're at the mercy of luck, at least you've got another shot at it. That said, let's move on to the cards. Let's start with location cards. You have 22 location cards for the game. They're divided into different groups or types, as we will look at here. And pardon the glare, I'm just trying to get that out of the way here. First, you're going to have what's essentially a setup location, your starting location here. There's one for 1 player, where you're going to again play with 6 Space Marines, again 3 different teams of 2. There's one for a setup for 2 or 4 players, because either way it's 8 Marines. 3 to 6, either way it is 12 Marines. And then set up for 5 for 10 Marines. We'll just look at the one for 1 player, but honestly it doesn't really matter. They all essentially work the same way. They're just a little bit different in terms of their stats. And they are, by the way, identical on either side. That's how you know they're the setup ones. They don't have a card back like that. So, what you're going to see on these is a nice little image, a title, maybe some game text here. This tells you how to set up the location deck, okay? And it'll tell you a different group of cards that you're going to set up, stacking them one on top of another. So in this case, it'll be this, then a card labeled 2, then one labeled 3, then one labeled 4. For this one, for 5 players, it's a 1B, then a 2, then a 3, then a 4. And so on for each, okay? On the sides, this is going to tell you how many Genestealers, the little alien creatures, the Xenos, how many will be in the 2 blip piles, as they're called, on either side of the location card. So in this case, 6 and 6. But again, it varies. 5 players, 8 and 8. I'll just keep that behind here for easy reference. These symbols down here tell you when a spawn happens. You have a major or a minor spawn. That tells you how many Genestealers come out of those piles into individual locations to go after the Space Marines. These here are symbols of individual locations and telling you how many spaces from the top or from the bottom, measured from the top down, measured from the bottom up, hence the little arrows here, where those locations will be on either side of the formation, the left or the right side. So left and right will matter. Again, facing and whatnot will matter. We'll look at how this setup works in just a second. When you're doing your setup, again, it'll tell you which type of location to put and what order they go in the stack of locations, the location deck as it's called. But it's not that it's just always the same location every single time. For every type, 1A, 1B, 1C, 2, 3, and 4, there are 3 different locations that you might draw for each one. So there is some variability to the locations you'll go through, even if you're playing with the same player count all the time. So your 1As include Service Shaft. It's got an upon entering ability. So the idea is that as soon as you have cleared out one full blip pile at a given location, at the end of that phase, you move to the new location. And then upon entering would trigger at that point. Main corridor and maintenance tunnels. Activate control panel. There's a control panel that you may see as a location. When you activate it, this tells you what will happen. Then for your 1Bs, we have Wreckage Labyrinth, Lower Access Way, Cryo Control. Then for your 1Cs, we have Core Cogitator, Apothecarian, and Munitorium. For your 2s, we have Teleportarium. I love these names and just the theme of 40k, even though I've never really gotten into 40k except for playing Battle Sister in VR. We have Dark Catacombs and Black Holds. Then for the 3s, we have Generatorium, Wrath of Baal Chapel, and Hibernation Cluster. And then the 4s always have a win condition listed here. You can win by being at the last location and clearing out every single Genestealer from the formation, which is on either side of the Space Marines, and from both of the decks. So basically wipe all of them out, or there's a win condition typically listed on the card itself. So you have Launch Control Room, Toxin Pumping Station, and Genestealer Lair. And we saw those symbols, right, that told you where to put the different things on the sides. They're actually referred to as terrain. I think I mislabeled them a moment ago, but it's the different terrain that you'll lay out on either side of the formation, counting up or down from the bottom, going as far as you're able to, depending on the number of Marines. So you'll match up to this symbol here. There is a little indicator on the left-hand side of each of these, the upper left, that has 3 different bars and will be either green, yellow, orange, or red. That is telling you the likelihood that Genestealers will spawn in those particular locations based on how they spawn from the symbols on event cards, using those major and minor spawns as mentioned on the location cards. So we have the Corridor and Artifact that are green. Notice some of these have activate abilities, some don't. Control Panel and Door for yellow. Dark Corner and Promethium Tank for orange. And Spore Chimney and Ventilation Duct for red. But you notice here, again, there's only 4 of these typically on a given location. So you're not going to play with all 8 for a single location, but you could very well wind up seeing all 8 by the time you're done going through all the locations to win the game, to get all the way up to that one that's a card level 4. They are, by the way, double-sided with the same information. Then you have yourself a giant deck of 36 Genestealers. These are those aliens that'll come out within that formation to try to kill you, that you need to wipe out. Again, you need to wipe out one entire blip stack on either side of the location card to move to the next location. And there are special win conditions typically at the end, but one condition could be to simply wipe out all the Genestealers that are in the blip piles or actually out in play. For all the damage that they do and the threat that they pose, these are actually pretty simple cards. You have 9 each of 3 different types, but the types themselves don't really do anything. There's just a symbol on them. So we have 9 that have a tail marker, 9 with, I guess, a tongue marker, 9 with a claw marker, and 9 with the head marker. And each time the artwork is identical across all 9 copies of that card. What this symbol is going to tell you is basically when a Genestealer is going to move locations within the formation, when they're going to move up or down the formation, or perhaps flank. But it's not individual Genestealers. When these are out, you'll have them in what's referred to as a swarm. All the ones on a given location, I apologize for the glare, are going to be one group that, again, will attack as one and defend as one. Though technically the defense is just if you roll a skull, you can take whichever one you want out of it. But when they're attacking, in this case there's 4 of them, you'd have to roll a 5 in order to survive. But what'll happen is when the time comes to determine if a swarm moves, the entire swarm moves if a given symbol that shows up on an event card is included on any of the cards in that swarm. It moves as a whole. If it moves into another location with another swarm that's already there, then they merge together. If one is attacked and the other one hasn't, they wait separately until all the attacking and stuff is done, and then at the end of that phase, they'll merge together. But the idea is they're growing as swarms. It's not individual enemies you're dealing with. It's trying not to be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Then you have a special type of Genestealer here called a Brood Lord. They do not go into the blip piles. They only come out when cards specify them, usually that location 4. They're double-sided. That helps remind you not to put them in the blip piles, because obviously you know which ones they are. Notice here that each of these has 2 symbols, so if either symbol comes up, the swarm that includes them moves. They have to be the last Genestealer in a swarm to be killed, so if it's this one and 2 others and you roll a skull, you got to get rid of one of the others first and keep whittling them down until this is the last one, and then a skull can kill it. But also, when the swarm with one of these attacks you, this symbol here indicates you subtract 1 from your die roll. That just makes it that much harder to survive. Then we have 30 event cards. Drawing an event card and doing what it says is actually the last phase of any given turn. This is what's going to cause Genestealers to spawn, Genestealers to move, and usually do something pretty horrid to you. So just to look at an example here, we have Chaos of Battle. So we have an ability, so as soon as it gets pulled out, something happens. In this case, change every Space Marine's facing. And then there's symbols here. This tells you, because it's white, that a minor spawn, again, the number of Genestealers back on the location card, will appear in either of these types of locations. So a minor here, a minor here. If there are multiple of that same color and value, right, yellow or red or whatever, then yes, the same number goes to all of them. And then if they have a skull symbol in this case, they will move up or down based on the markings on the Space Marine cards, as we'll see. That's going to move an entire swarm as long as at least one has that symbol. You'll also see some that have the major spawn, so yes, that can happen too. And instinct. So when you're playing cards as your Space Marines, your cards are going to have numerical values on them, and you go in order in terms of actually executing your actions from lowest number to highest. Whoever has the lowest is considered the current player. So if this were to be drawn in a non-solo game, instinct means that the choice here has to be made by the current player without telling anybody anything about it until the decision has been made, and then they can reveal how it works. For solo, it doesn't matter. Some of them, like the swarm here, will also have this little arrow kind of curving over instead of it being the up or down arrows. That tells you that if there are any of that type that are not already behind their respective Space Marine, then they will flank and go behind the Space Marine. Again, that makes them more deadly because you can't do rerolls. So we have 8 of these, of which there are 2 copies. We have the Swarm, Chaos of Battle, For My Battle Brothers, Gun Jam, Out of Thin Air, Full Scan, Secret Route, and Stalking from the Shadows. The other 14 are one-offs. We have Cleansing Flames, Enter Formation, Evasion, Flanking Maneuver, Outnumbered, Psychic Assault, Quick Instincts, Rescue Space Marine, Resupply, Rewarded Faith, Second Wind, Surrounded, Temporary Sanctuary. They're everywhere! Then we have our Space Marines. As you can expect, since there were 6 of those little tokens, there will be a total of 12 Space Marines, 2 for each. So we'll start with this group here. I apologize, not being a 40k aficionado, I can't tell you what these stand for. We have Lexicanium Calistarius, and then we have Brother Scipio. We'll look at what this all means here momentarily when we get through all of them. Then for this group here, we have Sergeant Lorenzo and Brother Dino, or Dano. For this group, we have Brother Zale and Brother Omnio. For this group here, we have Sergeant Gideon and Brother Noctis. For this group, we have Brother Leon and Brother Valencio. Then finally for this group, we have Brother Goriel and Brother Claudio. So, what's up with these cards? So, you have an image of the Space Marine. You have the little symbol on top and bottom. If you have a second printing, there'll be a symbol down here that indicates which group it matches. So basically, this symbol will be down at the bottom of the Marine image. That is not the case in the first printing. You just have to go by color for these. You have an arrow here, in this case pointing left. You have another version pointing right in the flip of the order of the art and text here. This is telling you the facing of the Marine, facing left or facing right. Again, if Genestealers are on the side they are facing, then they can attack them and defend and reroll when doing so with a support token. If they are behind you, they are flanking you, you cannot use those tokens. Facing matters. When you set up the game, you're going to have a long column. This is a very tall game when you're playing it with multiple players. You're going to have a tall column here of Space Marines just kind of laid out like this. The top set are going to start facing left. The bottom set are going to start facing right. And yes, that's the top half and bottom half, regardless of how many players or how many Space Marines there are. So like if you're playing solo and there's 6, it's 3 and 3. If you're playing with 4 players and it's 8, then it's 4 and 4. If you're playing with 6 players and you're playing with all 12 of the Marines, it's 6 and 6. And my God, you got a long table to be able to do that. This here is the range, and that tells you how far up or down the formation they can actually attack. So if you got this card here and there's 2 Marines above him, they can attack up to 2 spaces away or 2 spaces down. However, even if there is some kind of special way that is allowing you to somehow attack the opposite direction that you're facing, and again, if you're not facing, no rerolls, this is the direction you can attack normally. So you not only have to be within range, you also have to be facing the correct direction. I don't think I mentioned that before. I was just really focusing on the fact that you can't do rerolls when you're facing the wrong direction, but you also can't directly attack when you're facing the wrong direction either. As to how you are going to carry out actions like attacking, you have action cards, and it is 3 different action cards for each individual team. It has the image of the team members on the back, has their color, and has their symbol at the bottom, as you can see here. So by definition, 18 of these because there's 6 different teams. So let's use our same gentleman here as our example. Okay, so we've got an attack card. Every single group has the same 3 card types. So you'll have an attack card. That card's going to have some kind of ability. So it doesn't just let you attack. There's something special about it that differentiates these teams from each other, which is pretty cool. Lets you add a little bit of strategy. There's always a title up at the top, the type of card here, and then this number up in the corner. Again, this is the number that determines what order these cards resolve in. Lower goes first, higher goes last. Whoever does have the lowest is considered the current player. So for them, we have Psionic Attack as their attack, with their ability here specifically for Lexicanum. Each time he rolls a skull while attacking, he may immediately make 1 additional attack. So you can just kind of keep rolling if he is able to keep getting skulls. There's also a support ability, like Power Field here. This is what will allow you to take a support token and put it on any Marine. Plus, there's some type of ability for this, like in this case. After resolving this card's action, you may choose any swarm. Genestealers in the chosen swarm may not attack or be slain this round, because there's a power field in between you. Then you got the one that's a little more complex, which is move and activate, like stealth tactics here. So this is sort of a 3-step kind of thing with a special ability here. So moving. the first thing you're going to do is you can take either or both of your Marines and move them. And that basically just means that they swap positions with an adjacent Marine. So there's never anything where the whole line is moving up or down. That'd be crazy, at least not during normal play until somebody dies. Instead, it's just swapping positions with adjacent Marines. Then, also as part of this, you can choose to change your facing as the second step. So if you're facing right, you can go left or vice versa, which might help you if you're being flanked. And then you also have an activate aspect here. The last step, if you happen to be on one of those terrain cards, which is an activate ability, you can do the activation. And there's some type of ability. After resolving this card's action, you may discard one card from either blip pile. That's great. You may then spend one support token to discard one card from the other blip pile. So if you got a support token, you can use stealth tactics, taking out some Genestealers on the sly, and shrink those blip piles, because again, when one of them is empty, that's what lets you move on to the next location. So these are the ones for this particular team. Then for this team, same order. We have lead by example, counterattack, and intimidation. For this team, flamer attack, strategize, and forward scouting. For this team, dead aim, block, and run and gun. For this team, we have full auto, overwatch, and onward, brothers! And then finally for this team, we have heroic charge, defensive stance, and reorganize. Now, I apologize here for the camera work and the glare here, but I want to give you a sense of how this would play, which meant having to raise this up, which means the glare gets particularly bad down here. But basically what we're looking at here is how this would look perhaps at the start of a solo game. So I've pulled out the Void Lock, which is the one that says it's set up for one player with 6 Space Marines. That means, according to this, that my pile here has one random number 2, up top a random number 3, atop a random number 4, so I'll have 4 locations to get through to finish out this solo game. I don't know which 2, which 3, and which 4 it is, but I know there's a 2, then a 3, then a 4. I then looked at the little symbols on the sides here, with a little symbol and a number with either down or up, and in this case, for example, the door symbol says 1 counting down, so it's in the first place. The one that looks like a little Tetris symbol there of the 3 blocks forming sort of a reverse L, that's the dark corner. That is 3 down from the top, and so on for the ventilation duct, and the corridor counting up from the bottom. I have my blip piles of 6 Genestealers and 6 Genestealers. There's my deck in case I need more later on, which of course I will when I move locations, for example. There's my event deck, and I need to spawn Genestealers to start the game. I drew 1 event card. It actually had 2 major spawns, both of which get 2 Genestealers, 1 on orange, 1 on green, hence the 2 here and the 2 here. I have my Space Marines. I chose green, yellow, and that sort of grayish dark color. I shuffled them up, laid them out top to bottom as a formation of 6. All the ones on the top half facing left, all the ones on the bottom half facing right. I also then have my other terrain cards, which I might need later on, depending on what locations are coming up here. My Broodlord, in case that might come up maybe near the end. My support tokens, my evil combat die, and then over here, since I'm playing solo, I went ahead and set out my attack, support, and move and activate cards, the 3 action cards, for each of my 3 teams of Marines. Yellow, green, and that, again, kind of darker grayish color there. Now, normally you would keep your little token there if you're playing multiplayer in front of you, just as a reminder of whose Marines are whose. But when playing solo, one way that I've seen people do this is to basically lay out your 9 action cards, 1 row for each of your teams, 1 column for each type, so that when you are actually about to use an ability, you just take your token or card or whatever and stick it on there. One key thing that I have not mentioned yet about these action cards is that you can never use the same action card 2 rounds in a row. So if I use Psionic Attack, I'm going to flip it over, essentially. And then next turn, I can choose Power Field or Stealth Tactics, but I cannot use this one again. And then maybe I use Power Field next. Now it's the one turned over. Now my next turn, I can use Psionic Attack again, or that Stealth Tactics that I haven't used yet. So you can never do the same ones twice. So it helps to not only note which one you're going to play that turn, So you know which order to activate them in, right? Because of course it's going to go lowest to highest number value. But you also need to have a way to keep track of which one you just used so you don't use it again, typically by turning it face down. Or another option is just keep it face up and have your little token on it, and only move the token once you've chosen which of the other ones you want to do. Either way is fine. The key thing is that you want to be able to keep track of it, and for solo play especially, that can be tough because you're dealing with so many different Marines and so many different action cards. Typically in a multiplayer game, these would be in your hand, and you can talk about what you want to do, but you can't actually show your cards to the other players. As to an example of, let's say, attacking or something. Let's assume we got some support tokens here. Maybe there's one there. Maybe there's one there. Sure, why not? Maybe I'll put one on Gideon here. Okay, so maybe we're playing a card for, the green group here that is the move and activate. If he wants to move, he could switch places with Goriel or switch places with Scipio, because again, it's just moving to an adjacent location and switching. He could switch his facing, but he doesn't want to because he wants to be facing these Genestealers that are coming at him there in the corridor. But maybe he wanted to move because his attack range is 0. So he can't attack now. Green just used move and activate. But if you look at that card, for green, run and gun, after resolving this card's action, each of your Space Marines may spend 1 support token to make 1 attack. So in his case, he may spend that token. He's at range 0. He's facing the right direction. He can attack. There are 2 Genestealers there. So he's going to roll the attack die. On a 0, a 4, or a 5, he misses. On a 1, 2, or 3 with the skull symbol, he gets to remove either one of the Genestealers that are in that stack. That's how an attack works. Maybe if it was a regular attack, say he wasn't doing it based on the run and gun. Maybe it was just the regular attack card, perhaps. Let's say he didn't roll a skull the first time, he rolled a 0, so he was going to miss. He's facing them. He can spend a support token to roll again to try to take it out. On the other hand, Brother Goriel could also attack. He could attack these guys, but he has a range of 2, so if he was facing the other way, he could attack these guys as well, 1, 2 spaces in the formation away. Let's assume Gideon has his support token back, and now he's going to be attacked by these Genestealers here. There are 2, so he rolls a 5. He got more than the number that are in that stack. He survives. Let's say he rolls again. A 4, he's fine. A 0, he's dead. If he had rolled a 0 on that first roll, maybe he spends his support token, rolls again, he survives to live another day. Or, in this case, probably another few minutes before the Genestealers try to kill him again. So your first step, your first phase of any turn is to choose your actions. So which card are you going to use? Again, can't use one you just used last round. Second is to resolve them, starting with the lowest number going upward, and current player is considered the one with the lowest number. Then you have the Genestealer attack phase. Anyone that is with the Marine will attack. Then you have your event phase, so I draw an event card. This is an instinct one. If it was multiplayer, the person drawing it, the current player, lowest number, does whatever it says and then reveals it to everyone. In this case, choose a Space Marine, move all support tokens to him from all other Space Marines. And then you have your spawns, a major in red, a minor in yellow. Again, you're looking at the numbers up here, going from whichever side has that location on it, hoping to eventually empty out one of those. Then we have our movement as an example here. So movement-wise, we have an up or down for those that have a skull. So this swarm, this group, has, probably can't see it from the glare, has a tongue and a claw. Nothing happens. This one has a skull and a tail, so yes, it will move up or down. I look at Goriel. The symbol there is a down arrow, so he moves down 1 space, taking the entire swarm with him. He is now going after Scipio and has him flanked. Probably only 2 main things still to talk about then, which is what happens when you switch locations and what happens when someone dies, because that'll happen a lot. But you'll notice here by this play area, this is a 3x3-ish card table. This gets to be a pretty tall game. If you're playing this multiplayer, it's going to be running down a pretty long table, especially if you're playing with the full 6 players, because that's 12 freaking Marine cards. So I've scooted it over just a little bit so you can see the formation, as it's called, better. So say we just finish this up. Maybe this entire blip pile is dead. Kind of hard to grab from this angle without completely blocking the shot there. Not that it matters because of all the glare. I'm sorry. I'll keep apologizing for that. So, we've defeated one full stack in the Void Locker, at least emptied it out. So I'm going to take my number 2 location card and flip it as the Teleportarium. This does not have a when entering effect, otherwise it would happen as soon as I finished resolving all this new location setup stuff. It has an activate control panel instead, which is nice. Okay, I'm going to take all of my terrain cards out of here. I'm going to leave, if I can stop smacking stuff, I'm going to leave all of the Genestealers where they are. They do stay with the formation. It's like they're following you from location to location. And then I'm going to look at my new card. Let's see. So I have the Ventilation Duct 2 down. I have the Dark Corner 4 down. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to be here. I have the Corridor again, 1 from the bottom. But then my door is no longer part of this one. I need to grab my other locations. Pardonnez-moi. And there's my one with the symbol. Control panel, it is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom. Now I refill my blip decks. This blip deck has 4. I need 7, so 1, 2, 3 more. And then I have 5 for over here. There's none over there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my new blip pile. Again, I would do any upon entering effect, and I keep playing. And I should note there, I think I just made an error. When I refilled this blip pile, I just added cards to it. You aren't supposed to actually discard what's there and then do a fresh blip pile. It says discard/refill. Sometimes I forget and think refill just means fill it back up to what it says, but it does actually mean discard first and then refill. My apologies. And then the last part to look at here before we start looking at the expansions, so that we have, again, a sense of how the gameplay works, there are tons of great playthroughs of this online, is what happens if someone dies. The idea is that things will shift. So let's assume that Brother Goriel is the one who just died by whatever means here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at what is left and see which half or which chunk is larger versus smaller. There's 3 Marines here, there's 2 there, so the top half is the smaller one. Everything basically shifts from the smaller part towards the larger part to fill that gap. So control panel goes here, is my understanding. Everything goes down like that. It condenses. Now, next time around, maybe it's Scipio who's killed. Now, we're in a situation where both halves are equal to each. In that case, the bottom section shifts up. And yes, for what it's worth, you could wind up with multiple locations on the same spot. So like maybe, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe, who do I want to have die? Maybe Lexicanum dies or something. So now all of a sudden we have green and yellow on this space here. That just means more of a likelihood of Genestealers coming out to a particular place in the formation because now there's multiple colors in that spot. And you keep going until either all of your Marines are dead or you've completed the 4th location, meeting whatever win condition is on there or wiping out all the Genestealers out in the formation and the blip piles. So that's all content from the base game, which is pretty solid. You have different numbers of players you can accommodate, from 1 all the way up to 6. You have different cards for the individual locations, so it's not always the same location with the same abilities or same terrain every single time. You have the various events that'll come up in different orders. And you have 6 different groups of 2 Marines each with their different varied actions for each team. It's a lot of replayability just out of the main box. But now it's time to look at those hard-to-find expansions. The first of these from 2011, which is not one of the tougher ones to find, is Mission Pack 1. You have a card here that is effectively just the cover from the print-on-demand copy of this thing, because that is the only copy of this thing. You have a set of rules here that are covered on pages 1, 2, 3, and 4 of just 2 little rule cards. And essentially what this is adding is a new type of Genestealer, a new set of locations, and 1 new terrain card. So the new terrain card is Hull Breach. It comes out like any other terrain card, only when this symbol shows up on the location card during setup and whatnot. So your new locations, some of them will have this symbol, as we will see. It is a double-sided card. It's not like it goes in a deck or anything, as we saw with the other terrain cards. And it's a new activate ability on this one. It is green, so less likely to have a Genestealer in it. Activate, roll a die. If you roll a skull, slay one Genestealer at this location, and you may roll again. On roll of 0, the Space Marine must spend a support token or is slain. So basically, you're able to kind of keep knocking out the Hull Breach, but you got to save yourself if you roll a 0, because maybe you're about to slip out the Hull Breach yourself. There is a expansion icon here in the corner. Then for locations, there's now a new set of location cards that are red-backed. But in this case, instead of 3 of each, it is 2 of each for a total of 12. So 1A, 1B, 1C, 2, 3, 4. For 6 pairs here. So for our 1A, we have small craft bay and crew quarters. Then for our 1Bs, we have exterior plankway and infested biologics lab. For our 1Cs, we have Fornax and Void Vault. For our 2s, we have Locomotivus and Diseased Arbor. For our 3s, Tenebro Maze and Crew Reclamation Facility. Then our 4s, Machine Spirit Core and Librarium Vault. But again, differentiated from the others because they are red-backed. You're only ever going to play with green or red locations. You do not mix them up. Which does mean you're going to get a little bit less variability when it comes to your red-back cards from this mission pack, because there's only 2 of each that could come out. You're still using that initial setup card from the base game, but then it's telling you again what, 1A, 1B, 2, 4, whatever to put into that stack. And in this case, there's only 2 options for each one. Then you have one new type of Genestealer, the Adrenal Genestealer. It doesn't start in any piles, so as you'd imagine, they are double-sided here. They basically work like a regular Genestealer, but they move their swarm on 2 symbols. So we have a skull tail, a claw tongue, a claw skull, and a tail tongue. They can be taken out just like a regular Genestealer. It's not like the Broodlords where you have to wait till it's the last one or anything. It does make the swarm move more often like a Broodlord would. And this up here tells you that if you're defending against one of these swarms and you roll a 0, they get to shift and attack again. So again, Mission Pack 1 is a new set of locations, 1 new terrain card, and a new type of Genestealer to vary up your play. But no new Space Marines at all. Then we have a second pack here from 2011. This is Space Marine Pack 1. This is the other one that is not terribly hard to find at this point. So Space Marine Pack 1, again, same design as the other one there. A little bit of rules here, but it's really more there for a card clarification and to let you know kind of what's in it, because basically all you're going to do is just kind of swap these or add these, as the case may be, into your core box. So first, when I say swapping, again, we have these tokens that allow you to pick which team you are, and you leave this on the table if you're playing multiplayer so that people know which team you're on. Well, now, instead of these fiddly little tokens, instead there are cards. And they are with a hidden back, so you can shuffle them up and deal them out to figure out who controls which team. As you'd expect, there are 6 of these that replace the ones in the base game that were tokens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But this expansion includes 2 new teams of Space Marines, so you have cards for them as well. Your 2 new Space Marines for this yellowish team here are Brother Adrenal and Brother Cafael. And then for the gray team, Chaplain Raziel and Brother Metraean. And you'll notice here a little symbol down here at the bottom. In the base game for the first printing, which is this symbol, again, basically just kind of squished. In the expansions and the second printing of the base game, the symbol for the team is actually down there at the bottom, as I mentioned. So one way to differentiate out whether you have the first printing or second printing of the base game is the lack of the symbol or having the symbol. It also helps you very easily sort out expansion stuff from base game stuff, but there is a little Space Marine symbol down here to note cards from Space Marine Pack 1. For our action cards for this team here, we have Cyclonic Volley, Target Lock, and Purposeful Advance. Then for this team, we have Traumatic Blow, Armor of Contempt, and Litany of Hate. You notice here, though, when looking at these action cards, that the numbers up in the corner all have a B behind it. So that is just so that if by chance you are playing an action card and there's another one that has the same number, say from the base game, that lets you know to do the one marked B after the one with the same number from the base game. But that's basically it for Space Marine Pack 1. It's 2 new pairs of Space Marines, which is nice to give you more variety. It brings it up to a total of 8 possible teams when you add it to the base game, and now you're choosing with cards, not tokens. That brings us to another one here, marked as 2011. This is Deathwing Space Marine Pack, and this is the first one that's going to start costing you an arm and a leg to be able to actually get your hands on these. Basically, if it's one of the 2 that doesn't have the UPC on the bottom right of the cover, it's one of the ones that's going to be pretty expensive. I've seen this one go for anywhere from $150 up to about $350, though $350 is pretty high for this one here. But definitely probably a couple $100 to be able to get this one these days, unless you are super lucky. Keep an eye out, do some eBay save searches, stuff like that. So you've got your initial rule sheet. There's the set symbol there, and some card clarifications, credits and content list, and then just an advertisement that for some reason I still have in here for the Tyranid pack and what sleeves to use for these from back when FFG did their own sleeves outside of GameGenic. And as the name suggests, this is a whole new set of Space Marines. Though when I say a whole new set, I mean 6 different teams, not 8. So you would replace the original 6 teams from the base game with these, but if you're playing with Space Marine Pack 1, you would still keep the 2 new teams introduced in that pack as part of your 8 to choose from, theoretically. So they have their little team selection cards again for the individual symbols here. Symbols in some cases will look familiar, in some cases will not, by design here. Obviously, though, like if you see overlap with the expansion, like say this with Space Marine Pack 1, you'll be able to tell which one it means because you'll have the pictures of them on it and the color. For our new Space Marines, for purple here, we have Interrogator Chaplain Uriel and Brother Charon. For this group here, we have Brother Hephaestus and Brother Raphael. Then we have Apothecary Nestor and Brother Examinaire. Librarian Menelaus, Brother Boreas, Sergeant Arbalan, Brother Gabriel, Sergeant Zaltis, Brother Jericho, and we're back to our beginning again here, again with their symbols down there at the bottom, and there's your set symbol. And then, of course, that means they're all going to have brand new action cards as well, which is part of what makes adding new Space Marines cool, because it adds new abilities and whatnot into the mix here. So we have, for the green team, for this team here, we have Terminator's Aim, Narthesium, and Trail of Destruction. For this team, we have Secrets of the Brethren, Gun Servitor, and Servo Arm. For this team, we have Deathwing Assault, Interrogation, and Stubborn Devotion. For our new yellow team here, Fury of the Lion, Beachhead, and Baiting a Stealer. This group here, the new one with the book, Hellfire, Force Barrier, and Mind Worm. Then for our last team, the new blue, Power Sword there, Swift Sword, Angel Watch, and First Legion. Angel Watch with a 1 there, very fast acting. Notice there's no letters in the numbers here, though, this time. So yeah, the Deathwing pack, it was one of the latter packs of the 4, and it just is harder to find these days for a decent price, but probably because it basically changes up all the Marines from the base game rather than just adding 2 Marine teams to it. Great for some variability and replayability if you're really into the game. Then we have the final expansion pack. This is the one that's going to run you $200 to $300 easy on the secondary market at this point, unfortunately. This is the Tyranid Enemy Pack, and as it sounds like, it completely replaces the enemies that you're fighting against. The Genestealers are replaced by the more difficult Tyranids, which makes sense thematically from what I understand of the lore. So then we have a symbol here for the set. Now, technically, this is two different modular expansions, either using these Hive Lord location cards or the Tyranids, or both. They play pretty well together. It's a little odd playing with these without these, but just bear in mind that when you are playing, the term Genestealer and Tyranid are considered synonymous. So there will be Hive Lord cards that mention Tyranids, but if you're not playing with the Tyranids, you just use Genestealers instead. But usually I would just play with these together. And the idea being that this replaces the level 4 locations, and then you have different new enemies to fight. The rules are covered on pages 1, 2, and 3, with one card that is basically just the content there and the copyright. Let's take a look at what we get. So first off, we have 4 new number 4 options, so more than we've ever had before for number 4 by itself, at least, in any set of location cards. And they're pretty rough, got this red sort of style to them here. So we have Mawlock, here's your set symbol, the Hive Tyrant, Trigon, and Deathleaper. Deathleaper is referring to a specific new card that we'll see here in just a second. This one pulls out the Deathleaper. This one does not require Tyranids based on its wording. Same thing with this one. But then Trigon does say Tyranid cards in the formation, but again, it's treated as if they are essentially interchangeable terms, so that would mean Genestealers if you're just using these. I do find it odd that they refer to them as modular expansions, because it really does feel like they were meant to be played together, but I've said that enough. Let's keep moving. This is the Deathleaper. Same on either side. It's one that's not going to start in a blip pile. It's going to be pulled in by, for example, that Hive Lords card that we just saw. All 4 symbols down here. It's going to move regardless of which symbol comes up, which is rough in and of itself. And while it doesn't have any special symbols, so it doesn't hurt you in some kind of extra way, like the Brood Lord causing a -1 to the roll when you're defending against it, or perhaps in the case of our Adrenal Genestealers, the whole thing where it'll shift and attack again if you roll a 0, there's no special ability there. But this has to be the last enemy killed in its swarm. You even have to kill a Brood Lord, or as we'll see, an elite before this. So it's basically regulars, elites, Brood Lord, then this guy. Though I will say, again, having a Brood Lord in play with this would really, I guess, only happen if you're playing with that particular Hive Lord that brings this out, but you're not actually playing with the Tyranids otherwise. So kind of a weird combination there. But yes, normal, then elites, then Brood Lord, then this. Adrenal are treated like any others. There is no hierarchy for Adrenals. They're right there with the regulars at the bottom. Not that it matters, because except for that little difference there with maybe pulling this in when you're playing with the Genestealers, you're going to be replacing the Genestealers with the Tyranids when you play. Just want to remind you of the hierarchy there, because it does matter when you're playing. Then you're going to have your ones that can be in the blip piles. Right, this back, so you can tell it's different than the Genestealers. You have 4 each of 4 different elites. Again, regulars must be killed before elites. These must be killed before Brood Lord. Again, special case, or our Deathleaper. The elites are special in that they actually have a name off to the side, like Lictor here. They do have the varying symbols on the different versions of the cards, but there's a special ability with them. So, for example, for the Lictor, after spawning in front of a Space Marine, the Lictor immediately leaves its swarm and flanks the engaged Space Marine. Or the Hormagaunt. After spawning, an engaged Space Marine must spend 1 support token or roll a die. On a skull, place 1 Tyranid from the Tyranid deck on this swarm. That's Tyranid deck, not one of the blip piles. Rippers. When a Space Marine moves, all Rippers engaged with him leave their swarms and are placed behind the Space Marine at his new position. Then we have the Ravener. At the end of the Genestealer attack phase, this swarm attacks again unless the engaged Space Marine spends a support token. That is the 3rd phase, by the way, Genestealer attack. Then you have 16 just sort of regular Tyranid aliens. All have that image there. They have the different single symbol down in the corner, again matching the blip pile back there. So just like Deathwing, this adds a lot more variability Then the other two packs, which probably explains why it is so sought after, it was also, again, one of the last ones produced, from my understanding, which also made it harder to come by. Also, though, copyright 2011. As far as how I store these, and this was not my idea, somebody suggested it, I believe, on BGG, or maybe on Facebook here, I use an Ultimate Guard Flippin' Tray 200 plus deck case. So you got like a little dice tray kind of thing here. I put the support tokens in a baggie, the selection, proof of purchase, and die all in a baggie, and then that just basically slides in here with a nice little lip to pull it out if you're putting the right side in first. Then sleeved, there's little trays here for cards. You can keep the entire base game sleeved in one of these that just slides in like so. And all 4 of the expansions sleeved. I have some old legendary dividers I just cut to fit in here. Sleeved like so, fitting in there. And then you can fit your rulebook on top. I actually printed out a couple little help cards from the Esoteric Order of Gamers that you can find, Universal Head on BGG. Put them in there like this, and then either side closes separately for easy access, and then the middle closes. It just makes for a great little solution rather than keeping them in the box, because in the box they don't fit very well sleeved. They'll shift around quite a bit. I keep the box because with a game this valuable from a resale standpoint, I really don't want to get rid of the box. And there you have it, folks. Everything for Space Hulk Death Angel, the card game, from Fantasy Flight Games in cooperation with Games Workshop when that relationship existed. And you can find the base game relatively easily, and it's a really fun but challenging solo game. You can also play it up to 6 players, as mentioned. Plenty of variability and fun to be found in the base box. But now at least you know what's in those 4 expansions in case you want to hunt them down. They're pretty expensive on the secondary market right now. For a completist, that might be a deal breaker. For me, as a completist, I was never going to buy even the base game unless I knew I could get all the expansions somehow, and managed to find them all sleeved in a bundle on eBay at one point for basically a little more than the cost of just the Tyranid expansion by itself. So I jumped on it, because at the time I had summer school pay from teaching that gave me a little bit more disposable income than usual. Your mileage will certainly vary, but even if you never pick up a single expansion, it's still a worthwhile game, particularly if you want a challenging solo game. Just know that by the end of playing your first game, you will hate the red combat die, and that hate will never, ever go away. Thanks for watching.